Welcome to Health Oddity, the show that strips away the jargon and hype surrounding all things health and fitness to help you live a long, strong and energetic life. Lining up at the bar this week, here's Peter Lant, Paul Bassett and James St. Pierre.
Hello and welcome to the Health Oddity podcast, episode 39. So today we have a very special episode that myself and Peter and Paul, who I'll introduce you to in a minute, thought would be a good time to do. This is episode 39, so we've got our big 40th birthday next episode where we have another guest lined up. But this one today, we're going to kind of call this sort of review, reflect, and kind of look back over the previous sort of 38 episodes that we've done, not individually, but kind of look back across and see if we can pick out some, guests that we've had on, some principles that have been talked about by guests, and really have just a bit of a discussion about what we've learned ourselves over the last sort of 38 episodes. And also answer a few questions that we've had come in from listeners as well. So before we kind of go on, I just like to say welcome and hello to Mr. Peter Lance.
Hello, how are we?
That was a dramatic pause. There.
Was it? Was it a dramatic pause? It just said the internet connection was unstable. I thought maybe you couldn't hear me.
Or maybe it's just a delay on the line. And hello to Mr. Paul Bassett.
Hello, how you doing, everyone?
Paul, I've been reliably informed, is surviving on about 1 hour's sleep, I think, today. So he may not be his usual.
Not that you could tell.
Upbeat self.
No, the insights may be lacking today. The quick wit.
If you hear snoring on this podcast, right, it'll be Paul's fault.
Yeah, there's basically the less sleep I get, the grumpier I become. I become an old grumpy man.
Well, just save up all your enthusiasm for the final thought, and that will that will be good. Peak for the final thought. Yeah. And also what we're going to do towards the end of this episode is tell you about something very exciting coming up with the Health Oddity podcast, and a way that we're going to look to expand the community slightly to have more direct communication with you, the listener, and hopefully give you more value and help you in a slightly deeper way than we do currently. So really, we're looking at now kind of what we have taken away from the podcast and answering questions that we've been given. So is there any initial reflections or thoughts from you, really, Pete, maybe over the last, if we look at the whole 38 weeks, how far we've come from when we started to really having lined up a real world-class, run-up of line of guests over the last 4, 5, 6 months. Any initial thoughts from you?
Well, first off, I want to say thanks to everyone for listening, because we've increased our listenership every month for the whole of this podcast, which is great. We love that. And we had a record month last month again as well. So that is great. So thanks to you for listening. And we were talking about, just before we hit record, about, James, you'd said one of your guys was like, James has had loads of feedback from his clients, which is great. Lots and lots of constructive feedback as well, which is good. Bullet points. Points, yeah, they're all quite well. It's how you attract the people who you want, right? And if you attract people like you, that's how you like lists and all that sort of stuff. So I talk about this with the guys who I train all the time, and like we'll all just get on. We'll all get on. It's really good and people are like, oh, you're lucky to have that. And it's like, I've created that, and they've helped create it as well by being the type of people that they are. But anyway, you said that one of your guys said that some of the guests that we've had on have contradicted what other guests have said. And the whole point is we're supposed to be busting through the jargon and hype behind the fitness industry, so to give you clear information. And I'm going to start out by saying I think we do that. I think we've done that very well because of the types of guests who we've had on, who are basically world class. A lot of them, like Dan John, Steve Maxwell, who've been lifting weights since the 60s. They've been doing this since the 60s, but they have different views on things. Okay. But the whole point in this is, instead of just going to Google or any other search engine that you want to use, and typing stuff in and getting a whole host of stuff which may or may not be true or beneficial or optimal or whatever you want to call it, there are different views on this podcast. But the views of the people who we have on have been tried and tested in their own life and the lives of the people who they train. So they have stood the test of time. They've stood up to the rigors of being tested. And then someone like Dan John will take stuff. He was talking about this on his own podcast the other day, actually. And he'll take stuff, and people would say, "Why don't you talk about that anymore? This stuff you used to talk about 10 years ago." And he's going, "Well, because I tried it and tested it and everything, I don't do it anymore because it wasn't beneficial and it didn't help." So he takes his movement matrix and he updates it all the time. And he says he can justify everything that's in it. And if anyone wants to challenge him on it, they can. And if he finds that a challenge is shows up something that maybe isn't working, he'll take it out and either replace it with something else, or just take it out and make it even more minimalist. So these are the things I've learned over the years from the people who we've had on. So this is one of the things I've learned a lot over the time of doing this podcast, but over the years of just listening to the people who we've had on anyway. It's really impacted my own training and managed to help me get away from injury and into doing things in a minimalist style, so I can keep training. I'm 44 now. I can keep training and I can keep myself healthy, and that's all I want. And I want to be able to do that for another 44 years. And using Paul McElroy, he's now my coach. He's Paul's coach as well, but he was on in January, I think, and then I had a chat with him afterwards, and he's now my coach. And my training has changed totally, and it's something I've never done before. But everything I've done before to get myself away from injury and that, I'm now starting to do a lot more volume with heavier stuff as well. But I can handle it. My body can take it because I've done all the years before as well. So, talk to me 10 years ago, my type of training would have been, I would have given totally different advice now. Well, I wouldn't have given different advice. I would give advice then based on what I was doing. Now I can give advice based on what I've done over the last 10 years, which is a lot of things. So therefore, it depends where you're at in your fitness journey. So if you're listening to this and you're starting out, we're not going to say, go and do what Paul McElroy would give you and do loads and loads of volume of training. Because you might hurt yourself and you might not be able to move properly and you might be tight and you might not have that strength. So you've got to start out in the very beginning. Maybe do what Tim Anderson was talking about and do some original strength stuff. So this is why it sounds like some of the guests are contradicting each other, but actually, it's kind of a continuum, and you can take that information knowing that it's good information and you can process it and use it however you want to use it. What is the most beneficial for you? So, you'll hear a lot of people, and we talk about this, about having your toolbox. And, you can listen to somebody and they can say lots and lots of things. And then you can say, okay, I'm not going to use all of that, but that resonated with me. And so did that. So I'm going to go and do those things. I'm going to put them in my toolbox and use those. Not forget about everything else, but I'm going to park that on the side and I might come back to it in the future, which is what we do as well. So I don't know about you, Paul. What do you think about that? Are you in a similar thing? Because you've come at this similar to me from not being in the fitness industry, not having a fitness background, and coming in from from doing a real job.
Wouldn't say out doing a real job, whether or not. Yeah, I mean, I think people come into fitness wanting objectivity. They want a result, and the result seems like some hard fact, but it's something that's real, that's tangible. And there's a right and a wrong. And we see it when it comes to people's diets. This is the only way. This is the way. We should go low carb. We should go high carb. We should go low fat. We should go vegan. And so we look for these kind of tenets and these kind of what are they like, the 10 commandments of fitness that are going to give us the objective truth. And I think what we've shown from getting so many different guests on is that it doesn't seem quite that simple, does it? And that's confusing, particularly if you go in with the mindset is all I want to do is be fit and I want to be healthy and I want to drop body fat. Surely there's just the right way to do it. But I think like in the sciences and things like that, like physics, there's multiple different disciplines trying to explain the world, and they're all kind of competing and jostling for that kind of ultimate explanation of the world. And it's the same with fitness. We're trying to interpret what we think are the basic principles and give them an expression. And really where it seems that all these people differ is just the expression of the principles. And I think that is the interesting part of what makes this podcast fun to do, is that we kind of have an idea of what these guiding principles are. And we could probably go into them. Some of you probably intuitively have kind of picked up on what they might be, which is the kind of the idea of longevity, this idea of training for skill and being aware of where you start and consistency, things like that, progressive overload. And then what they're trying to do is find the best expression. And there's always, like any discipline, you come in at one level and you acquire skill as you go on. And I think a lot of our guests have come in and talked about their journey from a lower level of skill to a higher level of skill and the mistakes they've made. And those mistakes they make have then informed the way they then try and solve that problem. And that's where I think people think that maybe the contradiction comes in, is that they're just solving the same problem in a different way. And I think if all you're thinking about is objectivity and there is only one way, then you're going to see those as conflicting views on those things. And I've come in I came into fitness saying all I want to do is get strong and fit. It must be really simple. Why is it not linear? And that's I suppose that's what I've noticed is that. And I think for me, what I spend a lot of time is trying to tie all of that together, and that's what I find interesting. But then I've always dedicated quite a lot of mental space to it. So I think if you're coming in looking just for a quick, easy answer, then you're going to probably come away more confused when you listen to lots of different people. I mean, that's not our intention on the program, but I think what we're trying to do is trying to get you engaged in your health.
I think as well, one thing that, a few of the guests that we've had on, obviously Dan John, I've known for a long time, have a lot of respect for him, and he's really affected my career. I think Josh Hillis, his kind of approach, which was not so much an approach, but more of a philosophy, I suppose, or a principle, that really, really affected me and resonated with me in my own life and in the way I train people. So I talk to people around nutrition and eating and habits and that sort of thing. And I think that if you're dealing with, a robot, and you probably could give them this is the ultimate way to get to this goal, and this is all you need to do. And you just plug it in, they download the program and they just do it and they adhere to everything perfectly. But with dealing with a human, and we're all very, very different. And whereas something you said just made me think, I like my films and things like that. You could get like the Oscars, and you could have 10 different films up for the Best Picture Oscar. And they could be everything from an animated movie to a Lord of the Rings type thing, to a Marvel film, to something like Titanic, to a very small, intimate art house movie about a family. And you're trying to judge, well, which is the best movie? But we're all so different that we're going to have different likes and dislikes and things that motivate us. And as well, training and the way you eat and the way you live your life has to be fun in some way. You have to enjoy it as well. There's no point if someone said to you, well, all you need to do is this, and it will get you the result. If you don't enjoy doing that on some level, what's the point? We're only here once, and we're all going to die.
I think that brings us to someone like Steve. We
Yeah.
had Steve, and he speaks from many years of experience, and obviously he's worked with loads of different populations, and he's seen people from an elite level, both in terms of sports, through to elite level in combat sports, to the general fitness enthusiast, and so that's obviously informed his perspective. And he's alongside that, he's seen people with a lot of kind of hurdles to overcome. And I think if you're thinking about what's the safest way to train, what's going to get you a result that's going to give you the least long-term trouble, then you probably want to choose really safe exercises. You want to choose, isometrics are really effective. Slow and considered movements are really effective, and they do work. But I think it goes back to what you're saying. So sometimes we're not that simple, though, are we? We find joy in movement.
Exactly. I really think that, if you just wanted to wrap yourself up in cotton wool and it's very difficult, isn't it? Because no one wants to injure themselves. Yeah, that is, and none of us want to injure anyone. So we're not talking about, I'm not trying to talk about training unsafely. I'm just trying to talk about some things that, have got inherent risk in them, or that some people are very, very risk averse. Obviously, some people like to take more risks. Some people like to do things like, rock climbing and snowboarding and, even cycling, road cycling is, huge amounts of injuries in there for exercise. Running, so many people will have heard over the years, long distance running and marathon running and running lots on the pavements and things, your knees will be shot by the time you're 50, all these things that people get told, but people still run. One of the things, totally off topic, but people know smoking's not good for them, but they still smoke. You know what I mean?
The thing is, we're evolved to run, aren't we? How else did we catch food,
The thing I find with that, running's a great goal because it's an easy thing to do and everyone can do it.
Yeah.
But not everyone can do it
well.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah.
But people hate it, and rightly so. If you say to them, the way you're running, you're going to get injured, you need to stop, But if you listen to someone who knows what they're talking about, who'll be like, right, here's what you need to work on. You need to work on joint mobility. You need to work on stability. If you haven't got any stability in your hips, every time your foot hits around, something, your knee's going to be taking on that stability and move. I was talking to a lady about this only yesterday, who damaged her knee from running. And it's one of those things. If you love doing it, that is brilliant. But if for the love of doing it, you're going to do more and more of it, and it's going to injure you, you're going to need to do something to make it to give that longevity. And I've got a great quote that Paul reminded me of, and I heard this on a podcast called the Modern Wisdom Podcast, which I love. And the guy on there was talking about meditation, and he said he'd been doing this meditation for like 3 years, and then it wasn't really serving him anymore. And he's like, well, what do I do? Do I do something else? And his teacher said to him, why would the boat that got you across the water to the other bank, why would that now help you across the land? It's a boat, right? So all these different guests we've had on everything, like, here's how I've done it. Here's how I've done it. And it's some of them conflict. And then when we're talking about being safe in your training, something that is dangerous to you in your training now, in 5 years' time might not be, because you've built the strength, you've built the stability, you've built the stamina, you've done whatever it takes. You can balance on one leg. So then something that you wanted to do 5 years ago might now not be dangerous, even though it would have been 5 years ago, because you've changed your vehicle.
Yeah.
You've got to cross the water and you've turned yourself into a car or whatever, so that's what I've found in my own journey, and listening to everybody who we've had on, is things change. Your body changes, and it changes hugely in the very beginning as well. If you're only just starting out, the what do you call it? Gains, not
beginner
gains.
gains,
Yeah,
gains.
but you know what I mean. The progress is very quickly, like everything else, beginner's luck and all that sort of stuff. But it's not. It's just because you've made a change.
I mean, I think you bring up, James, a good point with risk. I think essentially our body adapts to risk. It makes judgments based on risk. You know, it creates muscle mass based on an input of risk. It says, okay, this is creating instability in the muscle, in the joint. This is a threat. Let's adapt and create a stronger organism. And so when you're training, you're essentially trying to manage risk. And I think, I mean, one of the things when I started working with Paul McElroy and used his A12, when he made the decisions about the exercises that should be included in the programming, you know, there's two prerequisites. Sorry. The first one is that is it an effective exercise for that body part or that muscle group? So, you know, what is one of the most effective builders of the legs and the lower body? It's the back squat. Okay. Could you put the front squat in there? Could you put lunges in there? Could you put all those things in? Because the second decision you have to make is, what is the lowest risk for the highest reward? And so I think what we see a lot of our guests do is play with that risk reward ratio and make the decisions for their client based on what they think what the goal is and the route and the time they have to take someone to that goal. And then their approach is going to be different. So if someone says, I want to have this result in 6 months, and this is my current start level, then as a trainer, you're saying, okay, well, this person's 50, this person has 2 kids, this person has a knee issue, this person has this. The pace you take them to that goal is going to be based on the kind of level of risk that you manage. And you obviously your experience as a trainer. And I think what we get with a lot of our guests is that they are very good at managing the risk on the journey, so that they manage to find the right level of intensity without that threat being too great, so that you get an injured client. I mean, because I got a question from one of my clients, let me just bring it up, a lady called Gemma. So she said, could you pick up the controversial statements made by Steve Maxwell in last week's Health Oddity podcast around weight training and kettlebells being bad for your health, and how you at Hounds of Health and we as individuals can mitigate these risks and identify danger signs early on. So, I mean, I think, you know, it was a really good chat with Steve, wasn't it? You know, while he was talking, we were listening really intently, and you know, he's got a lot of respect in the industry. He's got a lot of experience, and he actually introduced kettlebells pretty much to a lot of trainers that we know, and a lot of the gyms that you see, kind of based on all of his teachings. So, so you do listen when he speaks, but I think I've listened back to that podcast, and I can see that initially when I was sitting there with him, I was like, wow, okay, he obviously really hates kettlebells. And it sounds like he doesn't really like weight training because he sees it as too much of a threat to the joints, and that people are pushing themselves to the point in which they're breaking. But when we kind of examined him a little bit more, he was saying actually kettlebells, he sees them more as a sport. And I think probably a lot of the people he's worked with as well, based off his, you know, he trains high level people generally. You know, you're not going to be someone straight off the street training with Steve Maxwell. You know, he's a thought leader, so he goes into gyms and trains other trainers and trains other individuals that like to push themselves, and they're probably pushing themselves quite hard. As Tim Anderson expressed last week, he said he was training for multiple certifications, and those of you who don't know what some of the better kettlebell certifications are like, they do require a certain level of physical excellence in order to achieve them, and you have to push yourself quite hard to get some of those standards to demonstrate that you can actually reach them. And some people try and condense that time frame, and it can be extremely tough. It can be extremely tough when you're treating your training as a sport or at a higher level. And there is that risk benefit reward, and at times you've got to work out if that was correct. And Tim suddenly realized that his risk was far too high, and he needed to do something to offset that, and that's why he came up with the original strength. I think what I'm trying to do with my business, and I'll let Peter and James kind of talk about what they do to offset that danger, is to build the training model around principles of human movement, just like what Dan John talked about. So, there's push, the pulls, the hinge, the squats, and all those basic movements, to focus on them as skills, to load them based on the ability of the individual, not on how much they fancy like going with. So we will hold people back. We will push people forward depending on what we think they can handle. And I also integrate a huge amount of joint work as in the first 15 minutes of any class. I'm always talking about how do we create more control over our joints and our bodies and toughen up those weak spots. And also about how do we recover as hard as we train. Tim obviously didn't have any recovery built in. I think he was doing both things at the same time. I think that's what you picked up on, Peter. And there's only so much you can handle, only so much stress your body can handle. And so I don't know what you guys are doing, James.
Well,
it's interesting. I just had a team meeting today with my guys. So from when we're recording this episode on, it's a Thursday, the next Monday, so 4 or 5 days time, we can open up again for group training, in the UK anyway, or in England, for group training. So we're starting a program again called Pure Strength that we used to do, which is kind of like there's 8 people in a class, in a group, and you'd split people into 4 pairs, and you go through just 4 movements. So it's a push, a pull, a hinge, and a squat. And it runs for 7 weeks. And then we we change rep ranges each week, and then we change the exercises out, but we still stick with those 4 movement patterns, which are really important. And I was talking to the guys, and we have a real mixed ability. We've got lots of people now, because of the demographic we work with, who've had hip replacements or knee replacements, or, in some way they're restricted through medical reasons, or injury, or operations and that sort of thing. And so we've gone with a half kneeling kind of for the overhead, for the press. We decided to go for an overhead press, and we've, to begin with, because we've not done anything for a while, or most of them haven't worked with any kind of real load for a while, we didn't want to go straight in with like an overhead military press or a bench press. So we're going to go for a half kneeling kind of landmine press, which allows, if you're not familiar, it kind of allows you to press forward slightly and up. So if you don't have really good mobility overhead, it's a lot easier from that perspective, because we thought, well, okay, this is going to be safe for more people to do here. And then we also had to have the consideration of, well, actually a lot of people don't like kneeling down on their on knees and things, and some of them may have had replacements and stuff. So we already said, we kind of said, oh, this person, they might do it sat on a bench, and do the same movement sat on a bench, and other people can half kneel. And so, like you said, you really just have to know where you're starting from, where you're at, and the way that exercises and training can be scaled to your ability and can be safe but safe and enjoyable. I think because I think actually Steve might have even mentioned himself in the podcast the isometrics thing of actually you can build tremendous strength with isometrics, but you're basically just holding one position under high levels of tension for so many seconds, and then you might change the point and move to the next point and hold it. But he said, even Steve sort of said, it's quite boring, to do it, because, and there's not that same sense of, and as humans, we have this need, and again, it's ego, it's whatever you want to call it, but this need to actually feel some form of progression or achievement and tangible wins, and, someone patting you on the back and saying, well done, you've done that, and you celebrating with friends. So, but I think
it's knowing when to stop, though, isn't it? It's knowing when you push beyond your limit. I mean, one thing I wanted to pick up on, James, what you said, if you're dealing with people with hip replacements and knee replacements or other issues, are those the result of sports, or are those a result of maybe sedentary life or misuse or accidents?
Yeah, no, most of our members are not used to training and sport and things. It could be, in fact, most of the injuries that I see with members and clients who come in, they're usually the result of inactivity,
Yeah.
and carrying like lots of like excess body weight, and so you get all the pressure down through knees and hips and backs, and yeah, so it's not really, people aren't coming to me from a high level of sport most of the time. They're usually more inactivity and sitting down at a desk type issues and things like that, rather than overuse.
Finn, didn't he say? I saw him do it. Finn, who we had on, world champion kettlebell sport athlete. I mean, he's had an interesting experience recently, competing and becoming champion again, which is fantastic. But he did it off the back of an injury, because it's a very tough sport and it requires a lot of sacrifice in terms of kind of physical effort. So, but one of the things he said, it's not dangerous lifting weights; it's dangerous being weak. And again, it is that risk reward. Are you so weak that you're a danger to a threat to yourself? Can you get up and down off the floor? If you're not, then we need to work on that.
I've got that written down. I was going to use him as an example, actually, because obviously he's a high level sport athlete, but he stopped using double bells and he's now using single bells because he was getting injured. Because double bells is a big the difference between 132 and sticking it above your head or doing whatever with it, and 2 is isn't just another 32, it's huge.
Well, he's 80 kilos and he's using 232s for 10 minutes doing 100, 100
he
reps.
said he was getting injured doing that. And it was like he'd get injured and then he'd be okay. And then it just started happening too often, didn't it? So he was like, I want to carry on competing, but how am I going to do it? So then he went to single bells. But the risk reward on that is he wants to be a world champion. So he's willing to take a risk.
But you're doing pistol squats at the moment, which are a great exercise.
Yeah.
And they're quite a high risk exercise. You would not prescribe a newbie pistol squats. But the reason you can do pistol squats is, and you were talking about it earlier before we started recording, was I've done all the prep work. I've earned my right to do it. Yeah. And now I want to express that movement pattern at a high level.
Where I've always wanted to be able to do a heavier one. So that's where Paul McElroy came in, because, and it's like, well, how do I do that? And he's like, well, I'll give you it's the program from a coach who knows what he's talking about. Because I couldn't, I could do a wobbly, heavy-ish one, but then it's like, well, how do I get to be able to do it safe, like in a safer manner? Because it doesn't feel, there's a risk there. Today, when I did the heaviest one I've ever done, it didn't feel risky at all. It felt absolutely fine.
Well, you'd never go to Paul for a massage, would you?
No, but this is where some of this, like, when like some of the certifications that we've done and what have you is, these are the questions that they ask, isn't it? They go, right, you're going to critique someone's going to do an exercise, you're going to critique it, and you're going to help them out, because we all want, we're going to these places to become better trainers. And one of the first questions is usually, is what they're doing safe? And it's usually, because people are tend to be there knowing what they're doing. Is it safe? Yes. Right. Could it be better? Yes. Okay, that's fine. So they can carry on doing it, but it can be improved. So you as the coach are there to improve it. You as the trainee are there to be coached. And this is one of the things, because is it safe? Yes, it's fine. Could it be better? Yes. So you're doing something, but it'll get you to where you want to be. However, there's always room for improvement.
I saw a trainer.
If the answer no to is it safe, then it's like, right, what do we need to regress it back to make it safe?
The thing is, here's a thing that is an interesting expression. It's interesting you brought that up, because I was talking to an old client of mine who's now just a member of another gym. He built quite a lot of self kind of, what's the word? Efficacy. An agency. He just felt like he was empowered. He bought a load of kettlebells, and kind of that's, would lovely to have kept on working with him. I worked with him for about a year, but then he just bought a load of kettlebells, started doing all his own stuff, and it was great. And he's doing really well. But a trainer came in who's got a decent knowledge base, but basically tearing him apart with his, not one of my trainers, just in the general gym, tearing him apart with his form. Obviously his form needed a little bit of work, without the trainer there all the time. He hadn't had people just tweaking it. But literally he came to me. I walked downstairs and I was, going to go changing rooms, and he said, "Oh, this is, I've basically been torn apart. Everything I've been doing everything wrong." And he was really, really down. He's really down about the whole thing, because he knew, he needed work on it, but he kind of felt like everything he'd done was wrong. And it could have been better. I'd often seen him training and he could have been a little bit better, but you know what? He's done really, really, really well. Really well. He's getting really strong and he's built that momentum up. And I think you've got to also know where your client is to build in success, because no one's going to be, I'm not perfect. If Paul's picking me up on everything I did wrong, I would probably not be doing anything, because there's, when you're fatigued, when you're tired, when a lift is not your main focus, then your skill level is probably going to lack a little bit, and so you've got to see the person as well, so not just the exercise.
This is one of the things with having a coach. So I was talking to my branding guy, who's kind of a coach on how to get my brand across and my stuff. So he's one of my coaches, and he mentioned a lady he knows who, I think she's a photographer, and she was in this group of how to be a better photographer, right? And getting like one-on-one coaching from this person. And then this person said, "Oh, you can come into I've got this group thing which I'm running for free. And you can come into that as well, because you're my one-on-one client, so you might get some benefit from that as well." And this group thing was like a 2-hour thing. She talks to this woman an hour a week or something like that. This group thing was like a 2 or 3 hour thing. They went into the group thing, which was free, to try and get clients on board, and show them what you can do. And she basically showed them everything that she showed this person. And it was like, hang on, you're showing everyone that for free, and you're charging me to show me it just in bits, basically. And it was kind of, so this is why I like, that's using kind of like coaching as an example of somebody who, if somebody just shows you everything they know, you're not going to go very far, are you? If they show you stuff that you don't know yet that can be worked on, and then they've got a progression for that to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, depending on which way you go down the path, they can then say, right, I'll either refer you out because I don't know that yet, or that's not my expertise, or that brings me to where I got to in my journey when I went off and learned this, and I can help you to go down that path or whatever. So there's always something. So like you said, this guy got some self-efficacy and everything, and then just went, right, I'm going to go buy a load of kettlebells and just go away and use them. And that's cool, but it doesn't necessarily get you any further on your own, because like if you haven't got someone's eye on it and what have you, you can pick up bad habits, which is why I always like to either attend certifications or have someone coaching me who'll pick it up, because you don't see it yourself, and it's really hard.
It's just knowing the cues that are going to keep that person positive.
Yeah,
because it's so easy to knock someone off the kind of momentum they built, and it's not to treat people with kid gloves. Sometimes you need to be a little tougher with some people, and sometimes you need to be just really encouraging, and it's finding the right cue, because I think that's what we've done with the guests. We've kind of filtered out a lot of the things that we think are kind of random, where there doesn't seem to be a basis of experience or evidential basis, or because you see there's so much stuff on YouTube. We could just go on YouTube and type in so many different influencers and fitness professionals and things like that. But I think what we've done is said, okay, here's a selection of people who we think are good. See what sticks with you, and then start your journey to dig deeper. And you can dig as deep as you want, depending on what you want to achieve. And for me, before I was a fitness professional, I wanted to dig pretty deep, and that's why I've got into being a fitness professional. So it's just a question of knowing how far you want to go. And if you don't want to, if you don't want to personally dig much deeper, you've just got to find someone in your locality who can then apply that knowledge to you in the best possible format.
I mean, I've got a few things come up from the things that both of you guys have just been talking about. The first thing was was one of the things I think that Dan talked about was the difference between health or training, for health, for fitness, for performance, and for longevity, and how training for performance is not the same as training for health or longevity. Performance is something totally in and of itself, So like you said, you mentioned Finn, with the kettlebell sport, that's not necessarily doing his body any good, but that's not what he's doing it for. He's doing it to perform and to win the European title and the world title. And now even at the kind of young age of sort of 30, he's adapting his training because he's already recognizing the fact that the performance is having a detrimental effect on his health, for longer term things. That's important. And you were mentioning about the safe stuff. Another thing we talked about in the meeting today with my guys was people aren't going to move perfectly. You have this idea, you have the textbook diagrams of how things should be, or you watch the professionals or the top people doing movements. And I kind of said to the guys that, most of our clients are 40 plus and 50 plus and 60 plus, and they're not going to move like a textbook, most of them. And one of the things that Tim Anderson said when he was on is that movement, there's not such thing as moving badly, there's moving, and people will move differently. And so I said to one of the guys today, as long as someone's not going to injure themselves and they're operating with a technique that's kind of 80% plus, kind of coach and encourage and tweak, and move them, help them improve. If it falls below something where you look at and you think this is not effective because it's not being done properly, and you're a chance of injury, stop them straight away, and then move them into a slightly different exercise. And the coach kind of said to me, well, I kind of feel like it's different if I say that to one of the members, they'll kind of listen a bit more. But if he says it, he doesn't feel like he gets quite the same response. And I said, you will do. It's just you're doing it for the right reasons. It's like, stop. Okay, you're going to hurt. Because I said they're not going to thank you if they get hurt. You know what I mean? So you need to kind of be confident enough to actually just say, hang on a minute, stop. Right. Okay. Let's either, take 20, 30, 50% of the load off what you're doing and look at the movement more, or let's try a totally separate or different exercise, that's going to be in the same movement pattern and everything else that's going to be safer. And
you must whittle out people who are not willing to listen to that kind of coaching cue anyway, because when I've had people like that, I remember having someone in saying, I already know how to swing a kettlebell. And I'm like, okay, it's fine. It's fine. And I'm like, okay, that's great. And they weren't that bad, but they became very difficult to coach. And we just didn't click, and they didn't become a long-term client. So you tend to weed out people who aren't willing to
have to be open without a doubt. And we the other conversation this is for with the squat movement. I thought, well, what could, you could do a Zercher squat, you could do a front squat, you could do a back squat. I said, for this first one, we're going to do a goblet squat, and that's the movement we're going to use. And we went through, if someone can't do a goblet, they know the regressions of kind of like a squat with the TRX and all the different and movements. But I said the potato sack squat, you hold the kettlebell underneath and you squat down with the hands in between the legs, and all the coaches did it. And I said, this is great because this helps you, and you haven't got the weight on your chest, so it's not pulling you forwards like most people live in a kind of a cashew or croissant sort of position, don't they? Anyway, so this move. And then the final thing that came to mind was when we had Rick, Mr. Maceman on the podcast, and where he said, which was a great general point, I think, for everyone, which was that in the jungle of strength and conditioning, bigger weights or heavier weights need to be sneaked up on slowly and gradually, otherwise, you're going to get injured. So it's that kind of idea of sneaking up and only progressing when you're ready to progress, and not being led by the ego and by what everyone else around you is doing. So I think there's been so much that we've learned from the guests so far.
I love that because from my own personal stuff, if you're doing, let's take a squat for example. If you're doing a squat and you feel a bit tight in your groin, we'll say groin because it's not like that's what people will call it, But if you're feeling tight on the inside of your leg, but you're like, oh, it's all right, that'll go away as I get stronger. That doesn't necessarily mean that's what's going to happen. So you might have to stop doing squats with a barbell and go to a kettlebell and do goblet squats. And if you still feel tight, you might want to try potato sack squats because it might just be where the load is. Lower it and it might work. Then it might be a hip issue. It could just be that something's weak and tight or something's strong and tight because it's been overworking. So you've got to try and work out what that is. If you can get to that, you'll get back to doing back squats with a barbell very, very quickly.
You've got to be prepared to do that, haven't you?
Sorry?
You've got to be the kind of person prepared to do that. And I think
exactly. But if you're not, though, this is the thing. This is what I'm trying to get across. Is if you're not that type of person and you just want to crack on with it, the likelihood is it's gonna end badly anyway at some point.
Unless you get
it
help.
might be in 10 years' time, but it might end up with a hip replacement or something like that, rather than saying, I'm going to get rid of that tightness. And then, because, you get people with little niggles here and there. Pretty much everything I do these days, there's no pain. Zero pain when I'm lifting. Yeah. Zero. And if there is, it's an issue and it's a problem and I need to get it sorted very quickly.
Well, I think the thing is, if you're not moving your joints, there's no way that they're getting the kind of nourishment that's going to allow them to stay healthy. And whether you use a kettlebell or you use a barbell or you do it body weight or you do an isometric, as long as you're moving through ranges of motion which allow your joints to express that full movement capacity, and that will expand as you get stronger, then you're going to have that longevity. I mean, for example, like Steve's wife, I know she's had a hip replacement, but she was also a black belt in BJJ. So it'd be interesting to know the interplay between the kettlebells, between the BJJ, which is a very brutal sport. A lot of my injuries, I never did judo to any high level, but all the injuries that I'm carrying didn't come from rugby randomly. It came from my judo when I was being thrown in the floor and someone fell on me and I hit, whatever it is, broken toes, twisted knees, ankles locked out, all from judo. It's a very brutal sport. So, who knows?
Well, that's the other thing on that. Like, with things where, people do studies and research on like all different types of like diseases and what have you. So in cancer example, and people say, oh, like, I don't know, doing this certain, like eating this food gives you cancer, right? But it might be from a very small study of people who've just got an unhealthy lifestyle, like eating processed food can give you cancer. So yeah, but the chances are if you're eating processed food, you're probably not going to be living the healthiest lifestyle. As opposed to getting someone who, is super healthy in everything that they do, and then saying, right, go ahead and eat this processed food, and it's one of those things you got to take away all the other stuff, all the variables. Yeah. So saying kettlebells like cause hip replacements, it's Steve might think that, and he's entitled to think that, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the case. It could be lots of other things. Like Dan John's had a couple of hip replacements, but he's done a lot more things than chucking a kettlebell around. He's done a lot of things over the years, hasn't he? He's been an athlete his whole life. So
you did maths, though, Peter, didn't you? When we talked, you did maths? Did you do statistics as well?
Yeah.
So is it causation versus causality or correlation, where you can think that what's causing the problem? What is it? It's
correlation and causation, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, that's the one where you can think one thing's causing it, but it's not actually that simple. When you get two graphs and they follow exactly the same form, I think you look back and people say, oh, like the rate of heart attacks increased with the amount of fat in the diet. And actually you bring the graph of smoking and you've seen the same incidence as smoking went down, the incidence of heart attacks went down and things like that. So it's quite easy to misinterpret. It's not to say misinterpret, but to just think that one thing's that's causing the problem, when actually there's other things that have interplay, and we are complex.
And you can have you can have studies where they'll say, oh, we've allowed for all that, we've allowed for everything else, And it's like you never truly can. In my head, I don't know this for a fact, by the way. I'm just saying, in my head, you never truly can when you're using when you're using your subjects are kind of general public, basically, because you don't know what stress people are going through, and everything. People handle stress differently as well. There's the
thing as well, isn't there? Whereas like statistics can kind of be manipulated to say whatever you want them to say.
Exactly.
A lot of the time, you can always tell around. I think it would be really good, guys, to maybe let the listeners know what we've got coming up in terms of we've got a couple of great guests coming up over the next few weeks, and then also the exciting news about the group, the more kind of bringing the community out a bit more. So next week we have Chris Zaremba on with us, who's a fantastic guy. He's been to my place and spoke before, actually, and he's just got a new book out called From Fat to Fit at 50. And you can hear all about his story and his book next week. And the week after that, we've got Jim Hatcher coming on from the United States, who I think he still is the oldest person to ever do the SFG1 kettlebell certification, well into his 70s, I think. So, and I think he's 78 at the moment, maybe even a little bit older than that now. But he's a fantastic character. So we've got him on as well the week after. And we have a Facebook group, a Health Oddity Facebook group that we are launching. Do you want to maybe tell people about that, Pete?
Yeah.
Go on, let's sell it, Pete.
Sell it, Pete. Come on.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to be talking for 10 minutes. I thought I'd let you. I'll pass the baton. There you go.
Well,
like QVC.
So yeah, it's a Facebook group. Very simple. We will put the link into the show notes on this podcast, and then we'll probably include it in all the podcasts afterwards as well. But the idea is, for now, we're just starting out very simply, and it will evolve. It will evolve as the podcast evolves, because this podcast evolved from the very beginning. We were all brand new at it, and we didn't know what we were doing. We still don't really know what we're doing.
I was going to say it's now 8 months later, and we still don't know what we're doing.
But we've hit all the targets we wanted to on the number of listenership. We've got people who are actually going back through and listening to listening from the beginning and catching us up. So thank you for that. If you've caught this in a few weeks' time and you're actually doing that. But so the group is, we'll put a link in it. It's a Facebook group, and it's for you to interact with us three for now. Hopefully in the future, we don't know because we haven't asked anyone yet, but hopefully we can start to try and get some of the world-class guests who have had on answering questions and what have you in there, depending on their time. But for now, there'll be a couple of questions as you go in, just so we know you're not a robot or anything. We will be the admins of this group. We'll let you in. You can ask us questions. You can ask us questions to ask our guests. We'll tell you who's up and coming. You can send in questions for us to ask guests on podcasts. You can suggest people who you might want to have us to have as a guest on the podcast. So it's just a good way of interacting with us and getting the information that you want, because that's what this is all about. We want to give you
there'll also be the reading list as well, won't there? We'll put in there of all the books that guests recommend, and a full list, obviously, of all the guests and how you can get hold of them and contact them as well. So yeah, like Pete said, we're starting small, but we're seeing it as something that we can build on. I think will be really positive.
Absolutely, yeah. So yeah, we'll. I think you can put PDFs in there, can't you? So we might have a PDF with a list of all the books, and we'll have links to all basically anything that's mentioned in any of the podcasts by any of the guests, any resources, any books, anything. We'll have links to all of those within that group as well. So it's going to be hugely valuable from the very beginning, because we've got 38 podcasts before this to collate and put all of that information in.
It's lucky you got that maths degree. It'll help you collate all of that and do it yourself.
But we also had one of Paul's guys, wasn't it? Was it Toby Head? Yeah. Who said it's costing him a bloody fortune at buying all these books that he's been recommended by all these people. But that's great, because it means you guys are actually listening and taking action as well, which is exactly what we wanted from the very beginning. So we absolutely love that.
Which is what we do as well, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. Well, I'm on bone broth and everything. I've got something to make today.
Oh wow!
I see you stir your bone broth in between your close grip press ups and your floor presses and everything, don't you? I've seen on Instagram.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I had a good swig of it yesterday straight afterwards. It was nice and gloopy as well. It was lovely.
Do you feel your testosterone increasing?
Yes, daily. I have no idea. I don't know.
And James is on your dietary. Would you call it experiment, or has it become a lifestyle now?
No, it's still an experiment. That's the thing. When other guests that we've had on, obviously. So I think Brad Kearns was really influential guest that we've had on twice, which was really good. And then he led me down the line of getting the original Primal Blueprint book with Mark Sisson. And then and it's funny, isn't it? You then start listening to a podcast and they recommend another podcast or someone else and you listen to them. And I've kind of got into following people like Paul Saladino and Sean Baker. And for the last, I think it's 40, what day is it today? The 13th. So 43 days, I've been doing a sort of a carnivore experiment with literally animal based. So, meat, fish, eggs, dairy, not huge amounts, but yeah, I've been doing that for the last time just because wanted to give it a go, and I've been reading a lot and I thought, well, I'll experiment myself with that, which has been really good. So
I was watching the film Into the Wild the other day and it made me think of you. We're going to be like, all of a sudden you'll have this Instagram account where you're chasing things with spears and stuff like that, won't you? You've moved out of the house. You'll be living in a caravan somewhere.
Very
well, yes, because there's a space, because Steve's settled down.
Yeah.
So he just passes the baton to you.
Yeah, you start out with roadkill and then you progress from there, don't you? That's the way to do it.
That's the way to do it. Very. And Paul, do you have a final thought for this episode to kind of to wrap up at all? I've dropped you on the spot there with 1 hour's sleep.
I just had a vision of James going down the motorway, stopping every so often to pick up something from the side of the road and stick it in the back of the because you've got a big truck. It's just
either that, or just driving along with one hand on the wheel, which you shouldn't do, by the way. You should have 10 to 2. But eating a badger or something. It's just like,
eating a badger. Yeah. It reminds me of actually when I did veterinary experience at the age of 16. And all we seemed to do was put down animals. I don't think he saved any of them. It was like that League of Gentlemen, where every time he treats an animal, he dies. But I remember one day, he gave me an aerosol can and a lighter. And there was a bonfire and I had to put all the dead animals on it and set fire to it with a lighter. Anyway.
That does sound very League of Gentlemen, actually, yeah.
It was North Devon. I mean, and it was, 1995? Well, it was, But anyway, that's not my final thought.
I was going to say, that's the final thought to leave everyone with.
Sleep well.
I mean, I've still got the badger.
Don't have nightmares.
Yeah, sweet dreams.
It's difficult to come back from that, really, isn't it? No, I think it's been really fun doing this, hasn't it? It
has.
The first episode, we just wanted to test an idea because we'd had fun chatting to each other, and it's something I look forward to every week. And a lot of the people we're talking to, I've followed from afar and never got a chance to meet. And obviously, with lockdown, can't do any certifications or can't meet these people in person. So it's like a free education for me. It's a great way of just acquiring loads and loads of knowledge. And it also clarifies your own thinking because through discussing some of the ideas, you get to play with them. And I learn pretty well that way, rather than writing things down and stuff. I like to discuss them. So it's been great, really good.
Yeah, and we recorded a Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, didn't we? We've gone, very good. So cool.
Yeah, everything.
So, guys, if you have enjoyed today's podcast and podcasts in the past, please do like, share, subscribe, and definitely do leave reviews where possible. I'm not sure if you can leave reviews on Spotify. I think you can only leave reviews on iTunes. I'm not sure. But whatever platform you're on, if you can leave a review for us, that would be really, really helpful. And please do, if you are a regular listener and you want to join the Facebook group, please do click on the link that will come attached to this wherever you're listening to it, and go through and answer a couple of questions and come into the Facebook group, and you'll be in there right from the very, very start. You will be an early adopter, I think it's called, isn't it? And then you'll be in the group to begin with, and you'll be there from the start as it grows. So thank you so much for being with us for the last 39 episodes. We look forward to seeing you again next week. Say bye-bye, Peter.
Yeah, you didn't know what you run out of things to say there.
No, I wasn't. I was just going to ta-ra. Say bye-bye, Paul.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. And thank you very much, guys. We'll see you again next week. Take care.
You've been listening to Health Odyssey with Peter Lant, Paul Bassett, and James St. Pierre. To get your regular fix of hype-free health, you can subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can find out more on today's and other topics at healthodyssey.com, or find us on Facebook or Instagram by searching for Health Odyssey.